Good evening, everyone. My name is Max Rutschke.
I'm Danny Sullivan.
I'm Kyle Mitchell.
And I'm Noah John Marker.
And this evening we'll be discussing how Netflix went about reinventing human resource management by discussing the overview of the article that describes its reinvention, discussing more practical applications of the reinvention, as well as the positives and negatives of the article, and finally wrapping up with a comparison of its ideas to Boy Scouts.
Yes, so this article is entitled How Netflix Reinvented HR, and the author, Patty McCord, covers a plethora of areas in which Netflix utilized unconventional HR practices that helped shape the culture and motivated performance of the organization and many future organizations as well. It mentions two stories of two different workers that they had and the great lessons that they learned early on for their organization. One of the workers was named John, who worked as an engineer. During a time when Netflix was laying off a lot of their workforce, all of John's coworkers whom he'd managed were terminated, making John a one-person department. Though management tried to reassure John that they would find more people to help him out, since they assumed he'd need it, John stated how he was actually happier now without them. This brought up an interesting point because much of John's time previously was spent picking up the slack and fixing the mistakes of his subpar coworkers whom he'd managed. This led to one of the first great realizations for Netflix in relation to HR, and that excellent colleagues trump everything else. And the second coworker that they had mentioned was named Laura, who is a bookkeeper for Netflix. Though she was well-liked and contributed well to Netflix's early growth, Netflix now needed workers with higher credentials than she had. However, since Netflix realized they were trying to obtain and retain A-level workers, they knew that they'd have to let her go. Due to this instance, though, they decided to offer a rather rich severance package to make it easier for Netflix's management and for the workers that they would let go. They also develop and cover five main tenets throughout the article that help hire and keep the best workers possible. So Netflix believes it is better to find and hire workers that can be logical and have common sense in most situations, instead of spending time and resources to create formal policies that generally stem from the not-so-bright coworkers. Finding workers who are trustworthy, can effectively communicate, and act in the company's best interests resolve a lot of minor HR issues that would otherwise become and create much larger issues for the company. Netflix felt a better way to gauge their company and workers' performance would not be through ritualistic formal reviews, but rather frequent conversations about performance between employees and managers. Netflix is also not fond of the performance improvement plans, as those never seem to accomplish what they set out to do, as they most likely just end in the termination of that employee in question. Instead, Netflix decided to use 360-degree reviews that assess what employees should stop, start, or continue doing. In terms of creating teams, it is important for managers to plan to utilize the team that they have rather than the team that they want to someday have. Recruiting is just as important as making sure that the members that you have find the right fit for where their skills match up. Netflix's compensation structure allows these teams to be developed. Netflix does not offer performance bonuses, but instead uses market-based pay, trade-off between pay and stock options, and they do not have any vesting period that keeps employees tied to the company that they are in for longer than they desire. The author visited a number of startups too as a consultant and discovered three main issues that leaders need to pay attention to in trying to create a great company culture. One is that there's a mismatch between having a casual atmosphere and also encouraging high performance. Second is that employees must understand the levers that drive the business. And last is that there are often schisms and or subcultures between workers that may require different management styles. It is important also to understand the HR incentives given to employees, like parties, pool tables, company shirts, etc., are not that effective at improving morale like many companies would assume that they do. Morale incentives are far less important than doing what is good for the company, fostering an environment with great communication, and overall not imitating, but creating the conditions and the environment that works best for your company and your employees' needs.
In the article by Patty McCord, it helps us as managers or HR professionals because it provides insight on how a company should be run in order to be successful. Before going into detail about the 5 tenets explained in the article, there were 2 conversations that were demonstrated, as previously stated, proper managerial styles. In the first conversation, it spoke about the fact that Netflix had to reduce their employee staff drastically, leaving their top engineer to be working alone. Although this turned out for the better because the engineer explained that his peers were not necessarily the best workers or A employees, and that he was performing better alone. This conversation tells that in order to have successful departments within a company, every employee must have the correct credentials. In the second conversation, it spoke about the bookkeeper for Netflix, explaining that she was an excellent employee that was hardworking. Unfortunately, this employee did not have the necessary credentials that were needed by Netflix, so the managers at Netflix had to let her go. Furthermore, the people at Netflix did the correct thing. Since this employee was such an asset for the company, she was provided with a severance package after termination in order for her to be able to start a new career path. These are important factors for managers or HR professionals to understand in order to reach success within an organization. As expressed in the article, there are 5 important tenets that managers should consider and utilize. These tenets include the hiring, rewarding, and tolerating of the proper employees. And this involves the process of finding the correct employees or A employees to do the job needed. The next tenet is the finding of these employees to work in the best interests of the company. This is the need of the company for employees willing to go the extra mile to benefit the company. The third tenet is needed to perform formal, honest, and true performance reviews. It will allow for the employees to have a clear understanding of how they can improve in their work. Furthermore, the following tenet is the need of the company for the managers to create the best teams within the organization to keep every department in check. And finally, the need of managers to create and expand culture within the organization to increase the amount of perspectives, allowing potential new great ideas.
So I will be getting to the positives of the article. The very first positive thing of the article was that the company was very black and white in what they want. They were very upfront with employees and told them exactly how they wanted things. And if employees did not meet the criteria, then they'd be given their severance package and let go. One of the things I think that they did that implements this was the feedback system that they had in place. They had people say directly to their face as doing it, as opposed to doing it online anonymously. And I think this holds people accountable for what they want done. I thought there's a very positive thing that the company did and a very crucial aspect as to why they did so well. Another positive thing that the article talked about was how the employees have a fair amount of freedom. They're allowed to do what they want within reason, such as their vacation days, which I thought was a very interesting thing that they mentioned, and a great thing that the company's actually doing. By doing so, the employees are going to be a lot happier working there, and I think that's a good thing that the article had talked about. Another positive was that the company is focused on not only their success, but the employee success. If an employee is not doing well or not meeting the needs of the company, then they were going to be let go. And to me, I think that was a very interesting and good thing that the company is doing. It kind of shows that they're not only and they also encouraged employees to look at other companies before interviewing for them and getting hired, just so they could find if there's a better fit. I think this is a great thing that a lot of companies should start trying to do, because if you have an employee that's not happy where you're working, then they won't do well there. The last positive thing I thought was that the article gives examples of how their policies affect employees, such as how letting someone go who's not keeping up to the standards of the company, with the example that was previously stated with the bookkeeper, how she was let go because she wasn't meeting their criteria, helped them keep their high performance levels up. And I think that was a great thing that they mentioned, because a lot of companies are trying to create new positions for employees to keep them on when not necessary. And in turn, this kind of brings the company down and not keeping them up with their A-level employees that they have been talking about.
So overall, this article provides a lot of good information to help businesses out, but unfortunately, it's not necessarily applicable or feasible for all businesses. For example, while it can be very beneficial to offer generous severance packages in order to prevent individuals who are being terminated from creating problems for the organization. Some businesses, depending on their finances, might not be able to offer those same packages. So it might not be applicable for, say, much larger businesses than Netflix. Additionally, the article didn't discuss in explicit detail about what hiring practices or methods they used in order to acquire employees that were A-plus workers. While this probably wouldn't be included to keep as a closely guarded trade secret, it still would have been helpful had they gone into a bit more detail in how exactly they found such fitting employees for their organization. And the last thing that I would say this article was lacking is a more explicit description of Netflix's actual HR department. Although it discussed many of the different policies that Netflix used overall to maintain and retain great talent, while also terminating individuals who weren't the greatest fit for an organization, getting an idea of the internal workings of Netflix, specifically other individuals who carried out these HR practices, might have been helpful in getting a more concrete understanding of Netflix's HR model. And finally, we come to the idea of how to extend Netflix's strategies into other organizations, or other organizations that already use some similar ideas. And I would say that Boy Scouts definitely implement some of these ideas into their strategy. As noted in the article, Netflix was searching for employees who were demonstrating behaviors of adults, individuals who were very self-sufficient and high performers at their jobs. And in a way, Boy Scout also carries this out by rewarding and tolerating fully formed adults. For example, as individuals go through the different classes within Boy Scouts and receive new ranks, this suggests that they're practicing behaviors that the Boy Scouts want to see and continue to move them up within the organization and help them advance into higher ranks with greater responsibility. Overall, you see a lot more adult behaviors being exhibited by Boy Scouts who continue to rank up during the organization. In addition, Boy Scouts is able to emphasize creating great teams, sort of pairing individuals together who work well, but also will be sure to carry out the tasks and duties that are expected of them. They're able to instill within Boy Scouts a great degree of responsibility that passes along to all of the different ranks, and not only helps individuals grow, but also grow within the organization. And finally, Boy Scouts has created a very powerful organizational culture, as stated by the foundation of Scouting, which covers the strongest tenets of the organization. They instill within their Boy Scouts a strong desire to treat individuals with trust, loyalty, courtesy, friendliness, ensure that they're behaving kindly, but also being very obedient and disciplined. This way, they're not only encouraging an organization that is fun and enjoyable, but also one that is disciplined and whose members work very hard. Overall, the Boy Scouts embody some of Netflix's value, trying to bring about individuals who behave like adults and facilitate that growth, who will also help create fantastic teams to carry out the mottos and tenets of Boy Scouts and encouraging a very compassionate and disciplined culture. So that was our presentation regarding how Netflix went about reinventing HR through the overview of the article, the practical implications it suggested, as well as the positive and negative aspects of the article, and how you see some of these practices done within Boy Scouts. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you gathered some new information from this presentation and enjoyed it as well.